Without a name, the mind blows in all directions simultaneously. But once the four corners of Earth are established, a schedule comes into play. The above was not in reference to meteorology, but cosmology, albeit transcendental and to Philistines incomprehensible. Outre academic moral, all true graduate studies are perforce paradigmatic. Start off with the hard ones and get them out of the way, right? Wrong. None but twits long for the respect of other twits. Of course, to those living midst the twits, this is not the way it seems. Fragments from a protective services spec sheet. The body is the building, the brain, the monitors, consciousness, the security guards. How more things may be connected than most people want to think about. According to recent medical research, men over 40 should try and avoid any type of intrusive cardiac testing if they are diabetic, 10 or more pounds overweight, or drive a Corvette. City Health News update. Programs of self-improvement are for those who don't want to be improved. Old man asked the boy, is it the cheapness of being a smartass that accounts for its popularity? A man with civilized personal problems is a man who has gone to the public pond of fishing for worms. The collective is your friend as long as you're not. Thus it be that all great personal adventures are solo affairs. You can never understand the architecture of bio buildings until you realize that security guards are never stationed on the ground floor. Current court gossip. The latest priest to be dispatched by the king was the latest one to tell him again that everyone possesses the divine spark, including his enemies and his brother-in-law. As he sat atop a hillside looking down upon the city with all of its many institutions, systems, symbols, and beliefs, a man said to his mind, look, here will be our operating procedure. I'll just automatically assume that anything you're drawn to take seriously is a hoax and fraudulent conspiracy. If you're right, my old brain has served me just fine, thank you. Additional financial terms and Wall Street words clearly explained. Wealth. Twit talk. Using his own developed tools and technology for cosmological study, one man recently announced that he has found but one trace of weirdness in the universe. And that was made by man. And now this commercial definition. Death. The border on a certain kind of engraved invitation. Luck. What twits will talk about when they seem to have momentarily worn out the subject of wealth. Out in the field, two men were talking, and one of them said, what is so grand about discussing human consciousness is that you can cut it up into as many pieces as there are pieces, divide it into as many categories as there are categories, and say about it as much as is possible for consciousness to say. Maybe it was the sun, I don't know, but the other one, guy began to feel faint. And now, for the more advanced non-commercial chemistry students, this definition. Death, a catalyst for life. Is this cause for further consideration? Even guards assigned to upper floors still eat meals prepared in the basement. Life in the house. There was one place on this one man's linoleum floor whereon, whenever he stepped, it almost sounded like someone calling his name. The potential flaw in every knight's armor is personal human anger. A warrior's true foe can never be slain by criticism and frustration. This is why all dragons fear a keen, cold eye. And so should you, in a positive sense. Question. If the truth be known, who are probably this world's most frustrated, irritated, hungry, anxious, and always potentially pissed people? The answer? Mystics who didn't quite make it. The consciousness drug of choice amongst the simple is aspirin. Not unlike how damage control is their favorite form of progress and repetitiveness their hit version of sanity and intelligence. The royal tutor so told the young prince one day, "All of life is good. It is man's mind that sees therein parts being right and parts being corrupt. Thus it is that the religious always worship false gods." Another guy tosses his bit in the pot with these words, "There is a great conspiracy." And it goes like this. Philistines run the world, but they're so ashamed of what they are and how they're unable to change that they started the stories of there being a secret group of conspirators actually running the world. The serpent lit a cigarette, and after a slow, soulful exhalation, leaned down and kissed the back of the eagle's neck and said, "It worked for me. Did it work for you?" What Philistines understand, they don't understand. It works for life. It works for them. One day a man suddenly thought, do the mental circuits enjoy bad news for the same reason the physical ones do being hungry, in that they know what is to follow? And Professor Presumptuous interrupts to add, well, even if that's true, that's still a hell of a way to run a life if you ask me. Well, just who the hell did ask him? A lesson in civil balance. The mayor's brother-in-law said to a touring group of upset and angry 5-year-olds, if there was any justice in this here life, the nose with guns would also automatically have a mortician's license. And one little nipper threw up on his feet. Meanwhile, more or less, across town another young lad was just asking his dad, why do men wear neckties? To prepare them for their ultimate strangulation. But once they don suits, isn't their hanging already complete? And the old man was so surprised at his son's insight that he threw up on the little nipper's head. Taking another man's thinking seriously is as dumb as not taking his physical presence so. And now, the visual weather forecast. If it looks cold, it is cold. Dad, do you think that'd work for other shit as well? Sure would, son. Just take a good look at us. And now, some overnight news. The non-sleeping cannot be awakened. Thank you, and please tiptoe out. Artists who don't know what it is that they're trying to do will sit for interviews so that they can try and tell what it is they're trying to do. From the Secret City Syllabus. Questions regarding success and death are important. Questions regarding success and death are important. Questions regarding success and death are important to twits. Now get yourself some good backup singers and get out of here. Territorial demands do good dogs make, but not reflective handlers. During a boisterous banquet, several of the royal ministers began playing a bit of inter-department verbal grab-ass, and finally His Majesty momentarily brought things to a halt as he noticed Yes, I guess it is pretty easy to make fun of our priesthood, to which the court philosopher added, yes, and there's none more deserving. Civilization. Security guards on a smoke break. How mental life works for most as regards the mechanical reproduction of music. Which would you rather have? A beat-up, scratched-up record you like, or a new, clean copy of one that you have no particular feelings for? Either way. There was, and still is, a certain neural planet on which all useful definitions and descriptions come to the creatures in the form of questions. And I guess I should also tell you that they have an entirely different concept of what constitutes answers. Two scientists were talking, and one of them noted, "It is being said by some that consciousness is the common denominator driving and holding all of reality together." And the other one replied, "I might be able to accept that if instead of consciousness we said that which consciousness represents." Yeah. To which his associate responded, "But wouldn't that put us right back where we started from?" "Yes," replied his friend, "but what else is new?" The particular type of directions a knight needs for his quest can always be identified in that whenever he hears them, he smiles. Unwarranted seriousness has kept more would-be warriors home than any form of physical illness. The royal philosopher addressed the court. "I have some good news and I have some bad news. The good news is that there is no bad news. It takes a real special kind of court to accept news like that." Today's final word on primitive views regarding man's need to change as reflected in this redefinition of one of his more popular words pertinent, he believes, thereto. Title: Corrections, a misnomer for growth. I didn't misread it. Also, compliments of the house, this complementary side definition. The simplistic, yesterday's complex. Hey, viewer writes, "Listening to you sometimes makes my head hurt. To tell you the truth, I've always had trouble with it, but just never exactly like this. Oh, P.S. I kind of enjoy it." Up, a poem. Man's future is in the sky, way up high, just above his eye. Those whose understanding of man is based on divisions such as sexual, social, racial, nationalistic, have no understanding of man. Civilization, a prose. The mayor of the bus stopped the city suddenly in the middle of the street, stood, turned around, and addressed the passengers sternly. "You people just may as well face the facts now. Everyone on this vehicle is a whore. It's just that some of you are already bent over while others are waiting to. Now shut up and settle down." And off they took again. One guy pretended to talk about other people just so he could secretly talk about himself. But he didn't fool anybody. Well, except everybody else and himself. Which was the object in the first place. One of the security guards one day suddenly thought, you know, if you look at everybody long enough on the monitors, they all begin to look like you. Psychology in a family way. "Remember," chided a father to his son, "it was man's thinking that came up with the idea of him having an unconscious, not consciousness." The transcendental in a nightclub setting. Mystics are to priest as drinkers are to the bartender, as the band is to the MC, as dancers are to the doorman. Those for whom the collective toil will miss the experience itself. Hey, complained a man to the judge, they stole the idea for the Gordian knot from my brain. The court took a short recess. Looking surprisingly solemn, one father sat his son down and said to him, I've got to tell you the truth. Going through life as a shithead won't cost you any more than not, but it also won't cost you any less. From this short conversation later arose the well-known religion of the surprisingly solemn, to which all shitheads, delivered or otherwise, are joyfully welcomed. Is this an anti-clerical crowd? The Post-Survival Life of Man, a poem concerning how it goes. Those not hired can't be fired, but all of yous can be killed. While on an inspection tour, one of the vice presidents of the security company made this mental note to himself. The problem with the monitors is that their electrical power comes from the basement. So he noted, but had no immediate remedy. After the young knight had mounted and was ready to leave on his first adventure, his father reached up and for a moment held tight his leg and said to him, do not let someone else interpret your life for you. Then slapped the steed on its way. A quest that is not original is not a valid quest. The true artist cannot work by the hour. The idea for getting high in its many chemical forms was taken from security guards originally assigned to the mezzanine who decided to try and move on up to higher floors. One guy defines optimists as lying pessimists. By some frontline accounts, in yesterday's skirmishes, over 2,000 adjectives and adverbs were either killed or seriously wounded. Gathering pigs is no problem. Hollering, "Say!" without it sounding swine-like, that's another story. Another definition from our Showbiz Handbook. Being born. Stage fright. In a surprise move to up the stakes in post-mortem punishment, God has just announced that no longer will the unrepentant simply be tossed in a lake of fire, but will henceforth get to hear Him tell personal anecdotes about Himself. That's almost enough to send you back to the arms of Mother Church. You can give a pig a badge, you can give a pig a gun, even place him at the monitors, but you can't make him write a symphony. On campus, in real time this time. Sociology is psychology for minds too timid to confront the human condition, while psychology is for minds too dense to face up to it. That's right. I do that sometimes because I know you think you left out something, which is not as bad as sometimes you think you put in too much. One man was so dense that he was serious in spite of himself. Daddy, who do you figure that man was? Why, son, I reckon he was the one known as real life. Damn, Dad, that's weirder than shit. Yeah, boy, normally I'd agree with you, but geez, I got to live around here. A way to tell that a people are becoming civilized is that they cease thinking of animals as their equal and forget that the basement is part of the foundation. In the city, with the simple. Among the trivial, pettiness and pouting, pettiness and pouting can pass for meaningful criticism. And with them, criticism is an acceptable substitute for having no talent. See? You see how it all works out? On certain days, you could always be sure where all the fools, dolts, and dwarfs were in the castle. They would always be in conspicuous carping presence by the main gate whenever a knight was setting off on a new adventure. Although, according to reliable legend, Superman did come from Smallville, only twits come from Twitville. Yeah. See how it works? While the bus was wedged in a tunnel, a couple of passengers played this question and answer game as they waited. What, asked one, is the difference between a man with talent who is pissed and one with talent who is not? And the other immobile traveler thoughtfully scratched his chin and replied, how long do you figure we'll be stuck in here? The race of art does not go necessarily to the swift, nor to the slow, nor for that matter to anybody. There is indeed a transcendental reason that security guards are called flatfoots. Definition: reality in the city. A synonym for expectations. And now reveal for the very first time anywhere on this planet the dreamed of law of everything. Consciousness. The basis of all fear and sorrow, and from which those in the basement rarely escape, is the pre-neural knowledge that we're all somebody's dinner. A father and his son were one day in the woods near the city when the son asked, if we cannot change life, then what is our purpose in living? What? A father and his sons were one day in the woods near the city when one of them asked, if we cannot change life, then what is our purpose in living? And one of his brothers attempted to answer the question. Is it, Papa, that we should therefore just do the best we can? And another brother joined in to add his view. Nah, we simply do what we must. And yet a third brother countered, are we not like birds in a headwind flying? Are we not like birds in a headwind against which we cannot prevail, yet fly we must? And the old man picked up a pine cone and leisurely tossed it at a tree. As one security guard was momentarily lounging on an upper floor balcony, he suddenly realized the true nature of his forefathers' gods. They were, in fact, stomachs, furnaces, elevators, livers, and electrical systems. Religion. Myths taken indoors. When the meaning of a myth is made into a ritualistic practice, the marrow is sucked from its bones. And when a living, futuristic model of consciousness is given a name and a systematic structure, it begins an inevitable slide toward the past. And thus it be that the only knights known are the knights deceased. Mysticism as consumer goods. One who knows the subtle secret and tries to share it with others tends to become entangled in something resembling bulk sales. His latest book, detailing the limitations of the human intellect, which seems to naturally track it even as it continues to evolve, the author has entitled, Our Maps Make Us Saps. Well, I know it's convoluted. It's the name of a book about how the limitations of human intellect seems to continue to just parallel, to track along even while the mind evolves. And he named the book, Our Maps Make Us Saps. Two execs were speaking, and the senior of the two noted, I find the principal problem with minimum wage security guards to be how easily they forget the primary job they were hired for and get distracted with matters outside their scope. In a conversation, a father noted to his son, you cannot say that another man's thinking is wrong, for if he thinks it is right, it is right. It may be simplistic and childish, and he may be from a past evolutionary era. But let it go at that. The mythology of one planet says that the transcendental experience is not something one does, but something that one realizes. and that the mystical quest is not somewhere that one goes, but somewhere one begins to recognize. Fact. If part-time help hangs around, they'll find more to do. From the lore of one people, their original religious myth says that God created God at the same moment brain created mind, and mind monitors. Mid-afternoon one day, a guy asked himself, who is the dumbest? Those who criticize life, or those who take the time to say that there's nothing to criticize? In Philistine armies, troops are cautioned to look back over their shoulders, since it's understood that they won't be looking ahead. Why do you think it is that the simpletons are always referring to? Why do you think it is that the simpletons are actually referring to? What do you think it actually is that simpletons are referring to when they use the term night blindness, spelled with a K? A boy asked his father, why do dogs sleep so much? Because their consciousness does only canine work and no more. Top secret interoffice memo at one firm. Security guards should not be allowed to talk to themselves. The speaker stepped out onto the pedestrian island, raised his arms, and declared, a man's personality is to him as a goose is to its honk. A passerby stopped, thought for a moment, and said to him, don't you have that backwards? And the speaker lowered his arms, turned to the man, and quietly replied, bite my ass. Then began flapping them wildly and flew away. Stuck between the S's, a lengthy yet exhaustive essay. You can't be too silly, and you can't be too serious. What you can be too much of is alert and on the job you were hired for. Below the level of time is no time. Below the level of space, no space. Below the level of consciousness, no consciousness. And below the level of no consciousness, all consciousness. As of now, unnoted law regarding the architecture of psychology. The higher up you go, the quieter it gets. What more might be said regarding routine thinking and nightly perception? Consciousness beyond the monitoring level is akin to the center spot on the top of a spinning top. The higher up you go, the quieter it gets. And he began flapping his arms madly as he flew away. The consciousness drug, you understand, that's one term. The consciousness drug of choice amongst the simple is aspirin. It is already a quite well-known fact, and we've covered it here, mentioned it, that it's no problem to find chemicals, drugs, that will change a person's consciousness very quickly. Just within seconds, all the way from booze, which affects consciousness in a certain rather lethargic lower circuit insofar as the brain is concerned, to other drugs that seem to have a certain different effect that usually referred to in the general catch-all as psychedelic, that they're not simply depressing the neural activity and then indirectly respiratory systems and etc. Or it's not just directly increasing the respiratory system, the circulatory system. You know. Not just crude speed, LA turnarounds for you med students. But anyway, you know that there are plenty of drugs that will affect consciousness. Now, why would that say that the consciousness drug, so that you understand what I mean now, the all consciousness drug, you can think to yourself, all of the many forms or variations or substitutes for everything from mushrooms, peyote, LSD, anything. The consciousness drug of choice of the simplistic is aspirin. I would assume that probably most people would go, well, that's not true. And probably amongst that crowd, somebody might go, I wonder if that's a metaphor. Well, how would it even be said? All right, I'm saying it's true. Is aspirin. But I will admit that it's beyond metaphor, it's symbolic, even though people take aspirin, I assume. Think what it is instead of, as always, we've turned it not just inside out, but inside out at least 1.5 times. You have to do it an odd fraction, see. You can't just turn something inside out. Because if you do that, you simply say, well, we should all quit taking drugs, which is what most people say. And I'd say, well, all right, here's the real truth. We should all be taking drugs, right? So it doesn't count if you turn something inside out. It only counts, it only has any possible potency if you turn it inside out. You understand now what I mean an odd number of times. I said 1.5, we could say 3 times. Because you can't just reverse it. If you just reverse it, all you are is you went from being 5 years old to being 2.5 years old. It's just childish thinking turned backwards. So to turn something inside out, it's not that people actually take aspirin to affect consciousness, is it? Are you sure? No. If we look at it as being symbolic and not just metaphorical, do not people do something similar to take aspirin? Does anybody remember last time or several times ago when I was talking, had a string of them about artists and Philistines? And I point out that the supreme insult among artists, creative people of all kinds is you sold out. Sold out. There you are playing a cover band at Holiday Inn. There you are working in the graphic department of an advertising agency instead of painting great paintings. And on top of all that, somewhere toward then I point out that in the city, just in all ordinary conditions, selling out is survival. It's sanity. And it's not just survival in the sense of, well, we can excuse it because a man's got to eat. You got to get past all that. Is up here. Is you sold out to become sane. In fact, you had no choice. It's a real cheap, smart-ass accusation to make at people. If you're ordinary people, say, well, you sold out. Back when you were young, you had great dreams. Yeah, you're right. I can barely remember it. And I wanted to do great things. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And look at you now. Now I'm married and kids and a mortgage. Yeah, yeah. If I had to sell out. That's nothing. What you had to really sell out was here. I mean, you had no choice. If I say it's a cheap shot, the first part's real cheap. That's not even worth talking about. To just accuse somebody of selling out at the behavioral, at the observable level. It's selling out up here. And even if they understood that to be metaphorical, and if you said, what you did was sell out. You sold out your dreams. Never mind the family and the mortgage and all that. But you sold out up here. That is so cheap that nobody can, I mean, it's ridiculous because nobody can really respond to it. Well, they can always respond in a real intelligent manner like most people would, like, didn't? Because that's all you can do. Which is, of course, a proof in itself of selling out. Because you now have a lacked sense of reality. You do have now your own personal, apparently, mindset as to what constitutes reality. So if someone says, well, you sold out. And I'm not talking about your job and now being married and middle age. I'm talking about when I used to know you, you had all these great dreams up here and you would think about things. You remember when we used to try and discuss all the weirdness in the world and what might be possible? Yeah, I remember that. Well, you sold out. No, I didn't. Yeah, you did. No, I didn't. It goes nowhere. We're back to just turning reality back and forth. But they did sell out, but it's no basis for an attack. Because think about it a second. You have to sell out to be sane. You had to sell out to some degree to even make it this far. Because if you didn't sell out, you ended up in a rubber room. You ended up as part of the asphalt in somebody's driveway. You had to sell out. You had to finally accept that what seems to be reality is reality, more or less. And if you didn't think about it that way, which very few people I know think about it as reality, you accept a standard of living. You accept a certain kind of role as being the kind of role that is proper. And everybody says they've got some complaints, large or small. I wish I had a better job. I wish I'd gone to school more. I wish I had waited to get married. I wish I didn't have so many children. Everybody got all that. But at least they're sane. We're talking about the ordinary middle-class people. They are sane. That is because they've sold out. That is a form of aspirin. Because at the same time, back to the one we started with tonight, at the same time someone ordinary, of course, would laugh at that, to say that the consciousness drug of choice amongst the simplistic, the ordinary, is aspirin. The simplistic, if they heard it, would just figure that's insanity or something was wrong. But if you try to even look a little beyond it and assume, well, that is some kind of metaphor, if not symbol, for something, and then you can still say, well, for what? It is this, that people believe that they want to expand their consciousness, their thinking. And they do. It's not them, it's life. I won't try to sing it and hurt your ears, but it's an old song. Spring is bursting out all over. I guess from Oklahoma or some Broadway. I was going to change it some night and play it and sing at least the opening line. Is life is bursting out all over. And you can do anything you want to. You can be like some kind of deranged farmer out in the field trying to stomp down life. And you see a little twig come up. I don't like that. That's a conservative view. Or I don't like that. What do you mean laissez-faire economics? What do you mean? Disco's coming back. No, no. Life is bursting out all over. But it's men, of course, who, as they must, so to stay as the happy little shuffling slaves on the plantation. I'm sorry, upright citizens. Upright, honest citizens. They have to believe that, yes, we all are captive to a certain degree by age, our position in life, gravity itself, but we do have some internal freedom. You got to believe that to be ordinary. And to believe that, to operate on that basis, is when aspirin becomes the drug of choice, the consciousness drug of choice. Aspirin would sound, to take the basis of my metaphor / symbolism, to begin with, aspirin is considered absolutely innocuous. I mean, how much safer you give kids aspirin? If you don't know what to do, if somebody just says, I'm a little upset, you say, well, take an aspirin. I hurt my fingers, we'll take an aspirin. I mean, people just take aspirin. So after great thought, it was down there, it was 2 or 3 seconds. I was getting close to 3 seconds. I realized aspirin would be the one to use. So if you do get past the point of it being some sort of joke or smart-ass remark or just insane, think about it. What does aspirin represent? But now remember, at the same time, we're talking about life is pushing humans continually, driving it toward an expanded consciousness. Life is becoming more and more complex, and no one but worms and other simple people, politicians and bankers and other worm brains, the primitive, the simple. Only those kind of people with no sense of time. I'm talking about real time. Denies, whether they like it or not, that life is becoming more complex. It is life bursting out all over, in more and more places, in more and more complex manners. So in that sense, whether an individual somewhere, if I said, well, your desire, just a sane, ordinary person, even a banker, an insurance, an advertising man, a reporter, just people in the community. And if I said to them, well, what you're really wanting out of life, he hollers, a Corvette. I'm not overweight. And I said, no, no, no. Besides all that, what you really want is internal. What you really want is to expand your consciousness. He could say, no, I don't. But he does. If he's sane. And most people do not use the term, and many people, sane people, would sanely deny it. Or just say, well, I don't even know what that means, and I've got better fish to fry. More important things to do. But they do, if they are sane. That is what they're doing. But now let's go a little past the ordinary people and consider people who might purposefully try and pursue something like this. Listen to such as this and try and ponder what it means. Those people actively, they would say that, yeah, I'm trying to expand my consciousness. We could probably agree on that term. I could probably take in a term they would want to use. But it's to expand my understanding. I want to know what life's about, etc. So now let's take the people who would apparently actively be interested in such things, and may even claim to be pursuing some sort of attempted practice, or maybe taking, a few little drugs, or meditating, or doing something. Them too are subject to what I said. Their drug of choice is still, their consciousness drug of choice is still aspirin. And they would vehemently deny it. More so than the average person, if I got them to even go along with this theoretically for a couple of minutes. But those actively involved would be mystics, would be knights on a great internal neural quest. If I said the consciousness of choice, the consciousness drug of choice is aspirin, we'd assume that those kind of people immediately suspect it was a metaphor. I mean, they're just primed to do it. They would have no idea what it meant, and they would deny it. They go, that is the damnedest, deranged, off-the-wall metaphor I ever heard in my life. That makes no sense. Go back home, read your metaphor handbook or do something, Aspirin got nothing to do with consciousness. Especially with someone like me who is actively on the way, pursuing the great work, the great mystical challenge. It's still aspirin. There's one proof. There's always one proof, of course, if they deny it. God, they hate that. People better than you and I have been burnt, pulled, run over by tractor trailers by angry mobs of would-be mystics that didn't quite make it, who can get really, really testy. And they don't like hearing, such as that. And if you say, well, you've tried to do a lot. I know you have. You used to be a drunk. I used to drink, and I know you stopped. Yes, I did. I know that you used to. You're overweight. You ate greasy foods, and you call that out. You're a vegetarian, and all kinds of negative. Yes, I have. I've really worked on myself a lot. And if you say, but internally, all you've done is continue to take aspirin. Now, you give them a few seconds that they've got to ponder. They've got to immediately realize, suspect, well, that's some kind of damn metaphor, but Jesus, what the hell? I've heard weird crap. And all they can do is go, maybe ask you to repeat it. Aspirin? You go, yeah. That's not true. That's insane. There is no way. That fits into no possible allegorical, useful intent. There's no picture behind that is possible that would have any meaning. And that's the proof. I'll admit to you, I know that some of you were following and you were hoping I was about to wrap up a nice sentence and you go, aha, and it didn't work. I know. Does anybody consider why I keep dragging out the term about people telling what kind of guy they are? And several times of late I've tried to also point out it has nothing to do with the Western, well, almost all religious versions of humility. It's not that. That is, the contrary of not telling what kind of guy you are, it's not to build up some kind of Girl Scout points with the big guy upstairs after you die. And it's not like, well, I am so humble that I'm becoming even greater than I used to be. As a matter of fact, I slipped in one tonight. There was not a joke, as you all know by now, that said that in an attempt to up the stakes of post-mortem punishment, God has just announced that henceforth the unrepentant won't simply be tossed in a lake of fire, but rather they will get to hear him tell personal anecdotes about himself. Right, I can hardly wait. I don't know about you. Right? What is telling what kind of guy you are? It's aspirin. It's stepping, if you, well, I don't know. Well, several of you took psychology. In post-deconstructive psychology or psychiatry, it's known as stepping on your own dick. Like, down, boy, down. But it also gives the illusion. It is so painful, it is so uncalled for that people think, I'm down there having a mystical experience. That is taking aspirin in an attempt to work on consciousness. Are we getting closer? It's the same thing as telling what kind of guy you are. That's aspirin. I can make it, I will make it simple. Or I'll make it crude, but it's even simpler than this, and it's more complex. When you get sick, go into a doctor's waiting room. People really hurt. Well, they say they are. Sitting there with, you know, the guy said, you know, I think I broke my big toe, which hurts like hell, we'll assume. He goes, God, it hurt. If you just look at him and say, God, your toe's all bandaged up. You didn't break your big toe, did you? He goes, yeah. All you got to do is just look a second, just show any interest at all. And whatever his malady, you know, bad paper cut, his ear looks like it's falling off or something. And you say, ooh. I'm doing the guy who'll go, you'll never believe how I did that. All right, at one level, you were back just to the pack primate mammal level of offering a certain kind of sympathy. That there's a guy you never saw him before. He doesn't look dangerous, and you're there on neutral territory. You're not having to fight him to establish territory. You're there for some reason. I don't want to go into it, but you're there for some reason. And here's the guy, and you offer a certain kind of sympathy, almost like one dog reaching over and a wolf and rubbing another one that looks a little ill, or you kind of lick him, and you just think, oh, broken toe. And the person will not. They will not just go. They will, but if you just look for a second and go, oh. You won't believe how stupid I was. You'll never believe, here it comes. What? They're going to tell you what kind of guy they are. They're going to publicly take aspirin. But notice, here's the beauty of it though. The telling of what kind of guy you are, this is where it is always real interesting, because it sounds, if you are still thinking in another evolutionary era, if you are still childish, not simplistic, it sounds as though it's the opposite. People running at the mouth, speech itself is the proof. Very crude, very primitive, but it is the proof that an individual is alive neurally, that he is a living part, an example of me saying that everyone is being pushed toward more complex thinking, toward a greater complexity of their neural system. Everyone's being pushed to greater consciousness. In one lifetime, it's meaningless, the mechanical push, but they are. And the proof of it is that they will tell what kind of guy they are. It is, from one view, an attempt, and this is not psychological, we're down to the laws of physics and chemistry. It is an attempt, in a certain way, to massage themselves, to massage their consciousness. That's why people talk about themselves. That's what they're doing. It's not that they're just stupid and vain and some kind of dunderhead and who the hell cares about that? Everybody does it. It is a very low level. It's even worse than it's worse than Army beer. The effect it has on consciousness is almost nothing, but it's the norm. It's about all ordinary people have to do is, let me tell you what kind of guy I am. It's not, I know I can make it sound, which I do many times to try to get your attention, I can make it sound cheap as hell. Now I'm sure that some of you have left here before and thought, boy, the way I look at that sometimes after he talks about it, I think, and I'm sure, and some of you are correct, that later that day or the next day, you'll find yourself suddenly a stranger, somebody going, boy, let me tell you what happened. You're about halfway through and it's suddenly like your tongue has grown hair. And you think, God, boy, I wish I had shut the hell up. Well, you should. Don't tell me you haven't. I'll pretend that you do that quite often. And it has nothing to do with humility. It has nothing to do with spiritual goodness. It has nothing. What it is you recognize I'm taking aspirin. I am stepping on my own pecker while thinking I'm trying to get it up. And I'm doing that. I'm trying to be more conscious. All right? Is that too crude? It's like I'm trying to get more awake and I'm taking barbiturates. I think it's the same thing. As much as you can talk about the same thing in a polarized setting. But at any rate, what I wanted you to see was ordinary people, rather than this being some smart-ass cheap shot at them, which it's easy to do. You can do it. But people running at the mouth, talking about themselves all the time. And I don't mean real unsightly, out of the ordinary talk, but just the normal conversations between people, between friends. Friends do it a lot. Friends that know each other. One of them will keep telling the things he did today or what he did at work, and his friend may have heard this every day. Sexual partners, they may say more or less the same thing every day. And if you were staying outside, you might think, well, wait a minute, if there's some real possible or some intent beyond just making noise and human speech, God, are they missing it? Repetition. But it is a form of sanity. It is selling out. It is stability. And it is, at a meaningless individual level, it is an attempt. They're driven to it. It is an attempt to increase consciousness. It's like, well, if I keep talking about myself, and I talk about even my stupid things, say, I'm not just vain, the guy with the broken toe. You want me to tell you how stupid I am? It's like, it's not like it was an accident. I did it. And you could think, well, why does a man stand around and admit how stupid it is? We're all so stupid. Why bring it out in public? Why volunteer and say, may I tell you how stupid I was today? It's not necessary, sir. But they do. That within itself, though, can you understand, even though it's not psychological, you could take it as a psychological shadow. You could take that as being the covering. But it is as though somebody's trying to massage himself into shape. If I publicly confess, if I'll talk about all my warts, and I'll talk about my good sides, I'll talk about how I'm working on my warts and my bad sides, and I'll continue to talk. And it is almost as though they're trying to mold themselves into something better. It's life driving them. The thing is, it becomes a form of, it starts out as a form of aspirin. It is why I would submit to you, go back to playing that shit, I suggest to you that you do find in all philosophies, well, all religions, but even when it gets into the secular world, you'll find in all philosophies that, or just some grew out in the woods somewhere in India or Russia or Siberia, will tell people, hey, one thing is, don't talk about yourself. Just, stop it. And the little fresh student say in the caves, but you don't know about me. I said don't. And somebody says, but can I just tell you? No. Well, can I tell you how I got? No. Well, can I tell you what I gave up to come here to be with you? Would you please shut up? It's everywhere. And nobody understands why. Well, they can't, because it is it would be like having to take aspirin, and if they understood ordinary people, it would be that aspirin begins to taste funny. They would begin to think, is somebody putting something bad, like saltpeter or pepper in the aspirin, or am I growing hair on my tongue? No. It is a reinforcement of the selling out mentality. It continues to make one, no matter what you say. You can be bragging on yourself, you can be excusing yourself. But what you're doing is reinforcing the Philistine faux armor. It is a form of suicide if you're trying to expand yourself in one lifetime. But see, that is when it defies, let's say it defies everything. I was going to say it defies gravity, it defies all sense of reason, it defies all logic. Because then you say, wait a minute, you either got to talk about yourself or not, and it's according to what you talk about. I mean, to talk about yourself, there'd be good ways to talk about it and bad ways to talk about it, right? And when somebody does that to you, all you can do is say, right, and I got to go, because they're done for. But they would still insist. They'd go, well, wait a minute. I mean, he was playing some kind of game, or else he's nuts. Because I can understand that you should watch talking about certain things about yourself, that you shouldn't just be you shouldn't be bragging on yourself when you don't deserve it, maybe. Or you shouldn't, perhaps it would be good not to go around admitting all the dumb things you do. Maybe it'd make you internally stronger, like a little trooper that builds you up in some kind of secret samurai warrior internally. Never to admit, never admit pain, never admit you've been hurt. Maybe that's it. That's part of it, isn't it? Screw part of it. Yeah, it's part of it. Everything's part of it. Yeah, but I bet that's 50% of it. Yeah, but everything's 50% of something. But then they say, well, tell me why. I'm playing both parts, of course. And they say, well, you mean that it's not specific what you shouldn't talk about regarding you? No, it's not. Well, can you tell me why? Seeing it's too late. As soon as they say that. No, I can't tell you why. There's no reason why. Take an aspirin and call me. No, call somebody else in the morning. No, don't call me. Sorry. The consciousness drug of choice amongst the simple, read ordinary, is aspirin. Not unlike how damage control is their favorite form of progress. You remember that from the other night. That is in one person's lifetime. And I'm talking about ordinary, sane people. When I was pointing out that you actually, consciousness gives up the plans once you get grown. You become a man in a suit and a tie. You become sane. You become a Philistine. You're supposed to. Then you have no more plans. And the things that seem to be plans, as I said, are all forms of trying to reinforce. It's just taking more aspirin. It's trying to reinforce the position you're in now. That an ordinary man's plan says, well, yeah, I know I live in the basement, but hell, I like living in the basement. We're going to fix the place up. And their original plan, everybody's plan to start with was, I want to move up. I want to move up in the building. I want to be up in the penthouse. I want to be up in the big shots. Up here. But you finally sell out. Very shortly, you're supposed to. Because to get up there, it's not like taking an elevator and all that. That's the idea of gods. If you remember the one here with one security guard, it finally struck him that, wait a minute, the real basis of all the gods are my forefathers. And he started pointing out it was the internal systems of the building. Stomachs, livers, elevator shafts, heating ducts. Thought I'd bring it back up, give you one more shot at it. But you can't go up that directly. To actually go up, why people have to sell out, is there's no direct way up. If you're going up in the building, to carry my metaphor further, inside your nervous system, but now back to the building, that everybody starts out in the basement, to get up there, you got to get outside by your fingers and climb up the side of that friggin' building. It's a dream. That's part of what religion plays, is to think, well, there's stairs up or elevators. All I got to do is pay my money. I have to go in the elevator, and I have to perhaps light some candles or make some signs, pay them enough, but the elevator goes up. No, you can get in that thing, they close the door, and they give you an aspirin. That's their job, to calm you down. Well, they're calm. I mean, in case you think it's conspiracy, the ones that give you the aspirin don't think it's conspiracy. They're, in a sense, worse shape than you because they're running the elevator, and they don't know any better. They go, oh, yeah, come on in here. Here, have an aspirin and dream we're going up and down. Yeah, aren't we? The danger is why you have to sell out and be sane is if you're going up it, you got to get outside like and forget King Kong, he's too big for the building. You're like a flea, and the winds are blowing like 200 miles an hour, and you've got to scale that mother by your fingernails and no map. Well, some of us try to help, but there is no real map. You got to go up it yourself. That is what ordinary people would call progress. See, back to where I wanted to get right quick. We still got any tape?
1
minute. Is it at the ordinary level? They say, I'm stuck in the basement, and what ordinary people would think of as being plans and non-aspirin, non-sedatives, not something to sedate them. The plans are not actual plans. They've given up climbing the building. It's damage control. It's a holding pattern, and they call that progress. There is something useful. It's not an attack, that's why I'm bringing it up again. Look in your own brain. Look in your own thinking. Everything that you normally think of as being progress is not progress. It's like, all right, I'm going to get somewhere in the world. I'm going to pay off that damn MasterCard. That's not progress. Yes, I'm going to help. I'm going to quit smoking. How do you call that progress? Yes, I live in a basement. But me and the little woman are going to fix it up real nice. Take an aspirin. Oh, and cheer up. You can climb the side of the building, by the way. I always hate to leave on a bad note, but notice how people like it? I mean, like the drum roll at the end of the band, da-da-da-da-da-da, and you keep going. Those that didn't notice the other night, I gave the ultimate coda is with a smile. That covers all religion, all culture, all political persuasions. That is the finale to a man's life, is that he hopes that right then, he knows part of what's going to happen, but he also hopes that the big guy will smile and he'll be.